identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that co-evolves with its ecological pattern in order to facilitate the acquisition, the fulfillment of human needs in order to respond to the most core drive of every human being to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. One identity after another over time. The impatient rager. The impatient rager has emerged over the last couple of years in a pressure cooker of a couple of dominant factors. And how they're held in my body. Number one, my wife wants to work with me. I asked her to get a job working for someone else first, number one. Two, see how she liked it. She did. And number three, to be aware that there are many other opportunities for her that mean she doesn't have to work for me. Number two, I pointed out that it can be damaging to a marriage to accentuate an imbalance of power, that the healthiest relationships consist in a more neutral playing field. And number three, that I would pay and treat her with the goal of being somewhat of an equal playing field to her alternatives. In other words, I didn't want to create a sugar trap of dependency, which means that I can't pay her more than a competitor would. I can't have lower standards than a competitor would, because otherwise she is becoming acclimatized to an artificial employment relationship. All that being said, she wanted to work with me. She still works with me. So that's one component. The other component is that she speaks incoherently. And there's a couple of factors in that. One is a traumatic childhood in which certain things were just so horrific that she did not want to be present. Another is an act of loyalty, meaning that she was shamed as being stupid. And one of the things that she did was kind of turn that on her abusers by inflicting self-pain, pulling out some of her own hair, condemning herself more vehemently. And this is a tack to go from helpless violation to empowered violation, basically. Because if rather than collapsing under or just waiting in suspense to be abused, you initiate the abuse yourself. You're taking control, you're taking agency, you're also mastering fear. However, there's a part of her that believes that she's stupid as kind of part of that turning the abuse inward. This isn't the case, but there is a part that is loyal to her abusers. I will be stupid if you want me to be. So there's a loyalty there. There's also just the habit, the identity of, self-inflicted pain to counteract the helplessness of other inflicted pain. Her English is not fluent, and she's not as rational in areas. She's not as focused on the future. She is more focused on the present. There's also a certain tiredness / avoidance / laziness / kind of trying to get by rather than come out there. And then there's also well, I don't know. She's not aware when she's talking incoherently. There's multiple levels of this incoherence. One is making statements instead of questions. So she'll say, "You ate all the ketchup." Now, what she's trying to say is, "I think you ate the ketchup. Did you? And if not, where is it? Where is the ketchup? Is there any ketchup left?" But she says, "You ate the ketchup." Well, this puts me in a defense position, meaning where I have to say no. And I'm conflict avoidant, and so I resent being put in this constant position. Because the correct answer is, no, I did not eat the ketchup. But beneath that is, why aren't you paying attention? Where's your humility? Where is the seeing me? Stop invading and telling me what I am and am not. Now, this stems back to terror and smallness of my own, meaning the terror of wondering how much of my existence would trigger the rage of a giant. To an infant, to a child, all grown-ups are giants. And to a sensitive, they are that much bigger. I am, therefore, terrified of this type of conflict, of provoking the giant. And yet, no matter how small I became, no matter how much I hid, well, there was great loneliness, there was a great invisibility, but there was also the fear of something never left. And being pushed in these areas triggers this dynamic. And then there is, so that's one dynamic, the statement. The other dynamic is just sheer incoherence. I could be talking about one thing, and she will say, the door, we have to look at the door. Now, I'm talking about something. So there's two issues here. The first one is the lack of awareness again. So if you can imagine feeling helplessly invisible and terrified of existing for fear of being hit. And then on the other hand, desperately wanting to exist and feeling terribly lonely. And then the PTSD that developed more recently from sexual abuse by a therapist and all the anxiety and helplessness and terror that induced. And then in the reactivity of my body, losing my train of thought. And in the losing of my train of thought, being kind of temporarily exposed or re-exposed to fear, terror, and trauma. And then feeling frustrated at how hard it is to get back on the thread and continue talking. So the door, we have to look at the door. So this comes over and it lands on me as several things. So number one is complete oblivion, meaning she had a thought and I don't exist, basically, because she had to say this thought immediately, regardless of what's going on over here. I don't exist. She has to say something. So I feel immediately hurt and angry. What do you mean I don't exist? Aren't you paying attention? I'm in the middle of saying something. So that's one thing. Number two, I feel guilty and ashamed of my reaction, of the volatility of my reaction to the interruption, etc. I feel, I would say, afraid of the intensity. Because I know a certain percentage of people don't like it, and I don't like to not be liked. And I probably wouldn't like that intensity. And, so this is a very difficult thing. It's hard to love a part of myself that others don't like, and that I realize that I don't really like, but that I do compulsively, which is the nature of PTSD. And so this is so I feel hostility then at being set up to become someone I don't like and other people don't like, and I don't have any defense for other than to say, fuck it, you assholes, learn a little bit about PTSD. Take a fucking couple of hours to learn about PTSD before you spew your righteous judgment at me. You see, but that's too much. That's a perfectly rational response to a traumatically illiterate culture, to a culture that is illiterate about PTSD, but caused it. So my parents caused complex PTSD. My therapist caused full-blown PTSD. And my culture has done nothing to help. Zero. The culture has made it systematically worse. So, if we're gonna be rational here, if you want to judge me for the symptoms that you caused repeatedly and systematically and have done nothing to help, go fuck yourself. Because you're a coward, a moron, and completely unhelpful. And a hypocrite, because, it's the equivalent of throwing buckets of ice-cold water onto someone and then getting indignant when they scream. If you don't like impatient, reactive people, stop traumatizing children, for a start. Oh, but, yeah, get a fucking degree in parenting. Become minorly parentally literate. Do some trauma research. Spend a fucking 6-hour day that you'd normally watch TV and be mindless, actually learning useful things that would help you be a better parent and relatives and support people. Learn how to help a friend who's been traumatized, and do it, and then see how you're doing. And when you can figure out how to take one of the many people in your life, perhaps yourself, perhaps someone else, who's been severely traumatized, and help them recover, if you can figure that out and want to teach me how to do that, then if I don't want to learn, and you've got a good track record because you've done it and there's some basis to that, well, then perhaps I'll accept your impatience about my symptoms. We're a cult that takes boiling hot oil and throws it over a certain percentage of our bodies. And because we're a coward as a cult, we're the same cult who then goes and looks at these people with severe burns and says, I don't like that face. Yeah, you don't like the face, but you are too sociopathic to do anything about it or to empathize with what it's like to be burned. You're not doing anything to create more beautiful faces. You're just perceiving yourself irrationally as having nothing to do with the equation. If burn victims bother you, then do something that reduces the amount of damage to people's bodies by fire. Invent a better fire suit. Donate some money to the fire department. Look into different surgeries. Donate some time to the surgery. But we're not that intelligent for the most part as a cult. What we do as a cult is we generate massive amounts of unnecessary suffering for large swaths of the population in one area or another. And then everyone reacts less than optimally when they're in severe pain. And then we sit around adding more pain to their pain by complaining that they're not optimal and doing very little to alleviate it. So, this is, by the way, another identity. We're talking about the raging, identity. This is the identity of contempt, perhaps the superiority identity. I mean, this is incredibly painful to realize just how much this is going on as a status quo. This is not just, 1 in 10,000 people. A majority of people fall into this category of actively participating in cult norms that lead to severe pain and unnecessary suffering for a certain percentage of people, takes zero responsibility for healing that suffering, and then goes around and dumps more pain on these people when they exhibit symptoms of pain. So that's, there's some of that. But this is, we're in a cult where that doesn't get empathized with. Because an empathic cult would say, goodness gracious, how horrible. We did this to you, and then we did this to your parents, and then they did this to you, and then your teachers did this to you, and then you have nowhere to go in this cult that supports you. That's fucked up. I'm sorry, how can we help? But this isn't an empathic cult for the most part. It's a cult that says, yeah, you don't have enough of a positive attitude. In other words, it dumps salt on the wound that it caused. And because it's a psychologically ignorant cult, it's too ignorant to understand its role. So, you could say it's the best of both worlds. You get to be profoundly lazy and incompetent as a cult and learn absolutely nothing, thus passing on massive amounts of intergenerational abuse in your ignorance. And then pretend that you're not involved because you're too dumb to realize how you're involved. And then praise your cult because you've successfully created the illusion of its innocence, and then blame the person you've harmed from a righteous point of view that is based on the delusion that you have nothing to do with it, and neither does the cult. And that's pretty low. But, if you don't want to deal with that and you want to stay off in righteousness, then you just marginalize and scapegoat the trauma survivor. So anyway, there's some of that. So I feel terror and frightened of my reactivity. I can't stop the reactivity. So I get angry at the people who bring out the reactivity. So when my wife is interrupting me with zero awareness of her impact, because she's self-absorbed in that moment, and leaves me feeling helpless because now that I have been dissociatively interrupted and grasped that I didn't exist in that moment, despite, of course, wanting to exist for my wife, I now have either a statement that is incorrect, that now I'm put on the defensive from this statement. I can just ignore it, but then I think that's rude. So then I have to say no, but why do I have to say no when you shouldn't be in my space telling me what I did and didn't do anyway? You're really asking a question, you just haven't grasped the difference. And then there's this, fear of being judged because I'm in a bad mood at that point of being interrupted. And we judge people for being in a bad mood, and we praise them for being positive. Well, if you give people PTSD, then for the most part, they're not going to have a very positive attitude. So if you want people with a positive attitude, why not start by stopping the traumatic abuse of infants and children who cannot help but accept the abuse and develop symptoms of trauma. But of course, that's too much to bother for a narcissistic cult. It's like, no, I don't want to deal with it. Just let the abuse of children continue, but I will be miffed when said children become depressed and angry that an entire cult did nothing to stop the abuse. And after the parents narcissistically use and abuse the children, let's then have the cult use and abuse the children as narcissists. Like, gee, I don't want to take the time to actually learn why you're bitter. I don't care about you because I'm a narcissist. I just want your bitterness to go away without actually doing anything to help it go away, because it's all about me. And so if you didn't learn that from your parents, that you have no value and no meaning, and it's all about them, then hopefully you can learn from the cult members who trained your parents, who raised them, who set the tone for the cult to be all about us. So anyway, there's bitterness and anger around that. There's hurt also, because I don't enjoy feeling critical, bitter, cynical, etc. But I do. And that brings up sadness. So how to deal with this? Who to talk to about this? Well, there we have another cult problem, because this is inappropriate conversation in the United States. How are you doing? I'm feeling bitter, I'm feeling cynical, and I'd like to talk about it. Have a nice day. That's about the best that this cult can muster. I had no idea you actually had real feelings and would have the audacity to answer my question. But, okay. So I'm feeling nervous, and I'm also feeling this helplessness of I've lost my thread. Can I get it back? Now that just brings up a whole wave of associative memories of helplessness. Can I get my thread back that this oblivious woman has just decimated by interrupting as if I didn't exist to say absolute nonsense? Because when we go, okay, what door are you talking about? I was talking about a hike. There are no doors on the hike. No, the door. What fucking door? So she grasps that I exist. So, the amplitude increases until she grasps, oh, there's another person who isn't in my train of thought, who has no idea what I'm talking about, and I guess the door is not adequate. So she kind of descends. But I'm pissed off that I have to kind of verbally punch her in the face to actually, hey, I'm here. I'm here and have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Have I showed up on your radar? Okay. There's a door. What country is the door? Come on, get real here. Okay, is it in America? No, the door here. Oh, finally I know. What the fuck does that have to do with what I'm saying? Well, I had this thought and this and this. So you weren't paying any attention to what I'm saying. Well, that's deflating. You interrupted. That's rude and enraging. You can't be bothered to tell me what you're talking about. I have to basically punch you in the face verbally before you acknowledge and get any of that. And then finally you tell me there's a door. So why are you bringing that up now? What is, is it really what you had to So it just turns out that there was no thought about any of it. And then finally I figure out what door she's talking about, and then it's like, and then half the time it's not the door, right? That we have to. Half the time, she didn't understand something else I had said. So what she thinks is important about this door isn't actually relevant. Now, with that level of unconsciousness and incoherence, I now have a new problem on my hands that I don't want and is there in my hands, which is, given how fucked up this jumble of thoughts is that led to this interruption of the door, given that it's so fucked up, I'm not even sure I understand how fucked up it is. And I'm pretty sure she doesn't. Is it worth my time to unravel and spend 5 or 10 fucking minutes moving sentence by sentence? Do you understand this fact? Do you understand why this fact means that the door is not important? Do you understand that you got that wrong? Do you know why you did? Do you know how you got there? See, she may be often tuned out and off to something else by then. So then I'm left holding the bag of a jumbled puzzle of shattered, meaningless associations that is important to me because I want to understand and I want to be understood, but is not important to my wife, who didn't understand that she didn't understand, and who now understands that she didn't understand and thinks, what's the big deal? It's fine. I don't need to understand everything. You don't need to understand this. It's fine. I just, or she'll start sulking at this point, having been, beaten up verbally enough. Hey. Oh, and then she'll jump in with, something else. So this is where I say, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. And let me finish my sentence. The new sentence that you're now interrupting with another bit of jumble. Shut the fuck up and let me finish my sentence. So now she may flip into, oh, I'm so dumb. I'm useless. I'm just this and that. It's like, shut the fuck up. This is not all about you. This is not about your uselessness. This is about me with a love language of words, with a value of seeing you and being seen, trying to catch up to any one of these fragmented bits before you lay waste to everything I'm saying and jump off and then, so at the end of all this, what did I say? You said something about in understanding. Understanding is important, okay? So what do you understand? I understand that you don't want me to interrupt you. Correct? So is that going to have any impact at all on your behavior for the rest of the day? Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupt you. And I just give up. It's like, okay, well, we already tried that 1,000 times. It's not like you're going to stop interrupting me. We can't have comprehension and attunement going on here. So as this is going on, I'm also then thinking, I don't think I've ever been so enraged. I can look back over most of the last 45 years, and I've never talked to anyone like I'm talking to you. So then I think, well, what does this mean? Should we get a divorce? So overall, you seem much happier than when I met you. You don't want a divorce. I don't like the fact that I'm being more verbally, I don't know if you're abusive, angry, impatient, whatever. I don't like being this way. I want to be in my thread, continuing what I had to say before you brought up a fucking door that, oh my goodness. And you see, it would be fine if I could express this frustration and she actually got it and it made a goddamn bit of difference. But no. She will get whatever she wants to get or whatever her program says to get, and it has absolutely nothing to do with me or what I want her to get. So I feel completely and utterly helpless, powerless, frustrated, which is exactly what I don't want to feel when I've got layer 1 of helplessness and powerlessness, because I have multiple layers of helplessness and powerlessness. The first layer of helplessness and powerlessness is all of the intense, devastating emotions after being sexually abused on psychedelics and blamed and abandoned in so many ways by my therapist and my community. That's the first wave. The second wave of helplessness and despair and rage is reaching out to family members who were so fucked up from the childhood abuse, whether it's Sherilyn, the mother, the siblings, that they cannot be an empathic, supportive people. That has been raped and taken from them. The ability to be human in severe pain has been raped from these human beings as children. They cannot respond, which leads to another helpless wave of grief and frustration. Because that's our cult at work. Then no one else does. Then I feel furious at the collusion, the willful collusion to maintain this chronic ignorance. Because then I go back to my therapists and say, hey, I paid you all these tens of thousands of dollars. You never taught me a goddamn thing about trauma. You didn't teach me a goddamn thing about PTSD. You didn't ask the right questions. You don't know what you don't know, and it damaged me as your patient. Oh, they all have wonderful excuses about that. So now we have a new level of helplessness. So you grasp. If you're halfway intelligent, you grasp. Oh, this is how chronic intergenerational abuse is enabled by therapists who are so self-absorbed that they do not want to know what they don't know that's hurting their clients who are paying their salaries. They don't want to see their inadequacy as therapists. And so they're going to sacrifice the next round of therapeutic patients to protect the righteousness of their ignorance. Well, after you try a few hundred therapists and see, does any one of them actually want to learn anything? And you realize every single one of these therapists has an excuse not to know about trauma and PTSD, and an excuse for maintaining the ineffectiveness of their methods. You realize, gee, the next person who gets fucked over by their therapist is going to be in the same boat I am, because these therapists are more interested in preserving their ignorance and avoiding the perception of their incompetence than they are in actually helping their clients. Well, that's fucking enraging, because I'm in enormous pain for precisely that reason. Now I can't talk. This is so painful and overwhelming, I lose speech. My mind becomes much more incoherent, because the coherence of that level of pain is just mind-blowing, mind-numbing horror. So I go a bit crazy to take the edge off of that amount of pain, which means that it's a lot harder for me to keep my train of thought. Now, I'm not sure that Jen, my wife, will be happier if she leaves me. She's very clear she wants to be in this relationship, but almost every abused child will want to be in a relationship with their abuser. And I'm uncomfortable with the fact that I'm uncomfortable with several things. One of the closest alliances in the marriage is her inner 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and 6-year-old. 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and 6-year-old. These parts of my wife cling to me, want to be close to me, see me as somewhat of a hero, see me as a rescuer, because that's the role I played. I fought for her, meaning to protect her. I gave her, various opportunities because I was passionate about the idea of people actually helping trauma survivors, which was not happening in my case. And so I thought, let's start with someone else. So, I did a lot to empower her and stuff. So those parts, one, are so traumatized that some of them are dissociative and cannot grow up. So there's certain parts of my wife that remain in a childlike state. Well, I've chosen not to be a parent of my own children specifically, meaning not to have children, specifically because I thought this side of me, this impatience, would not be fair on the child. And so my parents went ahead and had children with that impatience and dumped it all on us and hurt us. I didn't want to do that to a child. But here I am, in a certain sense, doing it to a regressed 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old. And I feel terrible about that because that's why I didn't have children. I didn't want to, But I can't ask my wife to grow up. When she's 3 years old and sulking and feeling and then attacking herself, I feel enraged. Cut it out. Where's your fucking 27-year-old? Hey, 3-year-old, this isn't your fault. If you were actually 3 years old, I would not be even bringing this up. This is not an appropriate persona for a 3-year-old. This isn't your fault. But what does my wife do? She hands me the 3-year-old. You're angry? Here, yell at my 3-year-old. And I'm like, you fucking bitch. Get the 3-year-old out of there. The 3-year-old isn't responsible for you not doing what you said you would do. That's not the fucking job of a 3-year-old. Where are you? I didn't ask a 3-year-old to do this chore. I asked a fucking grown woman. Where the fuck are you? Well, I don't get to choose. Again, helplessness. If you want to be angry, here, yell at a child. I don't want to yell at a child. It makes me more angry that I'm given a child every time I want to fucking express my feelings because you don't do what you say you will, and I do exactly what I say I will do every fucking time. I do more than I say I will. You, half the time, you just salt in the wound again. You said you'd do this, you didn't do it. You didn't come and then apologize and say, I'm so sorry, I flaked out again. That must be really frustrating for you. It's like, oh no, that would be too mature. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to forget that I said I would do it. Okay, keep notes. No, then I'm going to forget to keep notes. How about that? You see, you can't get me in any intelligent, simple solution here. Yes, I could make notes every time I said I would do something, but I'm not going to. And then I'll sulk if you say, go on, write it down, you bitch. Grow up. Write it down. Do this. No. Oh, why do I have to do this? I'm dealing with a child again. Now, I have to look at this and say, a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, that feels hero dynamics is never going to want to grow up or leave. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm healthy. Now, I'd like an adult to talk to about this. Who's going to give any useful advice? You see, because, we could take my wife to a therapist and perhaps she would say, gee, you have a very hostile and abusive husband. I think you should leave him. Okay, great. Will the therapist take care of a regressed child? Oh, no, I'll take the thing for the hour, but no, you have to then figure out how to do something that I cannot help you with, which is learn to be an adult. And therapist, are you going to help find a new job so that she can pay and hear how you were wrong when this happens or that happens? You see, the therapist isn't really available. There's plenty of people throughout the entire cult that will say, that's wrong and this is right and don't abuse women. Okay, great. Anyone who can help my wife grow and heal effectively, that has any basis for making that claim and who wants to go at it for a couple of years, please do. I would be grateful. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to stop you from doing this. Well, when I met my wife, she was being severely abused by almost everyone. And knowing that I was unhealthy in aspects, the question I asked myself was simply, will she be transparent? And can we track if overall her well-being is going up or down? If it's going up, great. If it's going down, then, she should leave or, go back to what she was doing before or try something else. I offered to help her meet other men. I told her there were healthier men out there. Offered to set her up on dates if she wanted to meet any. Oh, no, I don't. I want to be with you. Okay. So am I going to be tormenting this person to push her away anyway because I'm not sure if I'm healthy in this dynamic? Because you're pushing my buttons. Lying, flaking out, interrupting, incoherence, self-centered narcissism, and self-punishment all rolled up into a jumble that leaves me being a father for your wounded child when I can barely take care of my own. It's a big pressure cooker. So that's part of this rage dynamic. And I'm not filtering it at all in this video. If anything, I'm exaggerating this. So, to highlight this, I'm kind of bringing out, I would say, the top maybe 1.5% of kind of angry, hostile, frustrated, enraged intensity. So my wife will see this part of me, maybe 1.5, I don't know, somewhere in that range, percent of the time. But it is there, and I do feel like it's in my mind. I think I'd like to be kinder, but then I feel helpless because I cannot. So then I resent her for making me feel like a failure, because all this panic and fear that's stored in my body around PTSD, etc., comes up whether I want it to or not, whether I think it's rational or not, etc., etc. Number one, there's still a part of me that is traumatically illiterate because I'm empathizing with a culture that is traumatically illiterate. I've now studied trauma for over 1,000 hours, and I know that everything I'm doing and feeling is completely normal for a traumatized person who's gone through these types of events. That I'm actually doing above average for someone who's gone through all of this in a number of ways, including, by the way, these videos, because our cult is so filled with shame, so filled with secrecy based on shame, so filled with fear of being seen and shamed, that less than 1% of the population is and would make videos like this, despite rage being an epidemic in the cult, because trauma is an epidemic and traumatic illiteracy is an even bigger epidemic, which is enraging. So you want to have less raging people? Become traumatically literate. You want to do that? Read The Body Keeps the Score. Read Alice Miller. Read Robert Bly. When you can empathize and understand the rage, you can be useful in healing it. If not, it is enraging that you persist on being ignorant as an individual and as a cult member, as a representative of a traumatically illiterate cult. So do your work and diffuse and heal rage, rather than adding your judgment and stupidity to the equation. So anyway, and it would be wonderful if people were intelligent enough about their ignorance for people to say, great, let me go out and do that, and rather than binge Netflix this afternoon, I'll actually become traumatically literate and useful to the many people around me who are suffering in silence because this cult punishes victims for speaking out about it. And so that's another thing. I don't want to be punished for speaking out. So there's just so many loops where, and then of course, I'm out of control how you respond to it. So there's another helplessness. You can judge me, I can't do anything about it. I can hide it, but then it's enraging to participate in the collusion of silence for an intergenerational epidemic that has been going on for thousands of years, traumatizing children, traumatizing women, everyone turning away. I don't want to be part of the epidemic, but nor do I want to be scapegoated and punished for being willing to be part of the half of 1% that actually would talk about this for educational purposes, so that the data set emerges. So that if you're someone who rages, you feel that maybe one person gets you. Maybe you feel you get yourself a bit more, and diffuse some of the rage in empathy. And if you're a person being raged at, you can understand the horrible grief of the suffering on you being raged at and the one who is raging, because the suffering is the same. My wife is in extraordinary pain, which is why she is incoherent. I am in extraordinary pain, which is why I'm partially incoherent. I'm enraged that I've been rendered partially incoherent. Articulating talent has been a strong point for me, and it used to be 500%, no, let's get real, 300% easier. Used to be 300% easier. It's gotten 300% harder. I get lost in the vast, traumatic space between words, and I don't know where I am anymore. And when I realize that I'm lost, I feel frightened, because I don't trust being out of control in a world where I've been hurt so many times when I'm not in control. And I spin out and get lost and lose control. And I feel sad that I'm so afraid of that. That the betrayal of human beings has left me so frightened of myself and energy in the world. Sad. I want to cry with someone about this, but almost no one understands it, because almost no one will take the quality time needed to hear it. And the tears feel frightening to feel and cry alone. So I carry them day after day, and they're a heavy load. We're talking over 100 pounds of body weight, of emotional weight that I carry. And I get tired and I get irritable because I'm carrying this weight and no one's acknowledging it. No one's saying, wow, you've been waiting for someone to cry with for 2 fucking years. And we're not going to give it to you. Just carry that weight another day. Because we've got a Netflix series to watch. Another mindless YouTube video to watch. It's enraging. The ability to put on a straight face and say, just carry that exhausting weight for another year, would you? Because I could do it, but it makes me uncomfortable. So I'm going to pretend that I'm really busy, which is why I have to go and watch this show that I couldn't even describe why it's relevant, other than that it's a great thing to not attend to you or deal with how uncomfortable it is to grasp my own psychological illiteracy or anything else. So there's a lot of impatience there. Now, while I'm raging at my wife, criticizing her or interrupting her, being angry and intense, a part of me is saying, oh, no one's gonna like you. People are gonna judge you for this. And I say, you're right. And I think, if you were watching yourself on the outside and were traumatically illiterate, you would be judging and not liking this. And I say, you're right. For most of my life, I was traumatically illiterate. I would just feel very uncomfortable and scared of someone like me in this state, and then I would just avoid them. And I say, well, most people are like that. And I say, you're right. And I say, I've been so lonely and avoided my whole life. The last thing I want is this. So this is all going as a meta conversation while I'm raging. And generally what my wife is doing is making it worse, meaning she's aggravating me more as this is going on. So how does she do that? Lying to defend the lie is one thing. So it's the third time today where I've come across, she said she was going to do this, she didn't do it. Now, this is enraging because if she doesn't do it, I have to do it. And I'm already under excruciating pressure of perfectionism that I developed as a child. Because every child who is not loved by a parent concludes that they're unlovable. Now, this is intolerable. So the child has to say, okay, what am I going to do to be lovable? I'm going to get better. I'm going to be perfect. And so the idea is I'm desperately in need of love. I just have to be perfect enough. I have to do this right, this right, this right, this right, this right, this right. I have to be perfect. But I'm still not loved. I'm still blamed. So I have to be more perfect. I have to be more perfect. And I do all these things and I get a little bit of love. And it's like, oh, it's so exhausting. Is all that effort to do all these things perfectly worth the little dribble of something that I desperately need? Is it worth it? Oh, I gotta do it, I gotta do it. So I've been doing this my whole life, trying to be perfect. You should see how anxious and terrified I get when I'm late 5 minutes. I have to be perfect, I have to be perfect, otherwise they're gonna be mad at me. And so this is running in the background, this effort of perfection. Now, the upside of that is I've never lied to a partner. Never. Never lied to a friend. Never. Never cheated on a lover. Never. Being unfaithful, etc. I do more than I say I will do. I'm very careful about what I say I will do, and I usually do more. And I have done hundreds of percent. I've done over 1,000% more than I said I would do with Jen, my wife. All to protect me from being hated and unloved and, to hope to be perfect and all this. She, on the other hand, has broken her word somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 times in the 4 years. Oh, I forgot to do that. Oh, I'm going to do that later. I'll do that later. She's constantly, I get the impression sometimes she would just lay on the floor looking at her phone for years if I actually just ignored that and ignored the fact that she's not doing any of the things that she says she would do. I'm pissed off at that. You fucking lazy bitch. Get the fuck off the floor. Why do I have to tell you, a fucking grown woman, to actually do one of the fucking things you said you would do? I have to do all these things to be perfect enough for you, and it's not even worth apologizing for breaking yet another thing? Doing, well, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to own that I didn't do it. I'm going to forget that I didn't do it. And then when you blow up about it, I'm going to make up an inane excuse or try and say that it's your fault. Oh, but you said this. You know, why is the car a mess, filled with junk? Oh, but you said I had to go and do this. I'm like, am I supposed to believe this shit? You think that because I told you to do a 10-minute chore 2 days ago, that precludes your ability to spend another 10 minutes unloading this stuff from the car? That this is just impossible within 48 hours to do 2 10-minute chores? That it had to be one or the other? Do you understand how fucking insane you are? But also, I get pissed. You're not going to let this be easy, are you? You're not going to let up on your bullshit until I've let you have all of the hostility I feel bad about giving to you. I want to punish her for that. I feel helpless again. So, you know, this happens at work. Do this, this, and this. I come. I said, do this. You did this. It's the same thing. No, but the customer said this. I didn't ask you to do what the customer said. I said to do this. And if the customer brings something up, give me a fucking call and tell me what's going on. You suddenly think you should run the company with 1 year experience? Is that the new plan? So, anyway, needless to say, I am raging about 1,000% more than I ever have before the sexual abuse with the therapist. And I've never dated someone like my wife, let alone married them. That also was in large part response to trauma and PTSD. And there's some question, despite the metrics being good. What do I mean? My wife has learned 3,700, now we're up to that was a year ago. We're up to more than 4,000% improvement in life skills. Her economics are up 4,000%, 5,000%, sustainably. She's got resources, she's got skills, she's got a driver's license, she's got a passport, she's got a visa, she's got options, she has her own space, she's learned tons of useful skills that she can take and leave any point she wants. So very good value there. I've also been monitoring fear levels, anger levels, hate levels, self-pity levels, gratitude fund levels. She's having a wonderful time. This obviously bothers me more than it bothers her. She's more confident than when I met her, she's more articulate. She's understanding more and more. I would say there's rotating competence. I'd say what's kind of a lot of what's happening is she's good at one thing, but then when I ask her to get good at another thing, she drops the other thing and does this thing. So there's that kind of dynamic. So I'm 97% confident that she's at least 75% better off mentally, emotionally, psychologically, financially than when we met. And we have periodic conversations about plan Bs and whether or not we should stay together as a couple and pros and cons, and the pros seem to strongly outweigh the cons for both of us. So that's fine. But anyway, so the contributing factors of rage are a culture leaving me simmering in PTSD with little medicine, little access to therapists, which is difficult when your therapists collude to sexually abuse you and then cover up the abuse, discussed with family members who know all about this and cannot do a single supportive act for a family member sexually abused by a therapist. It's just too much to ask of a narcissistic mother and traumatized children from a narcissistic mother. And, that's very sad. And it's very hard to get friends, because if someone wants to talk about something, this is all one identity. I actually like to see and be seen, and almost no one wants to deal with this level of nuance. In other words, they don't want to deal with me since I bring this level of nuance. That's very sad. And so there's a tremendous sadness and grief that is underneath all of this without a context and space to really feel and deal with it, because there's no understanding and empathy. That's very sad. And then I'd say a final contributing factor is my father's violence and rage towards me as the eldest child. There were parts of me as a child who were very much like Jen. Through the trauma, more incoherent than I am today. And my father made fun of that and humiliated that. So that hasn't been dealt with. So in a certain way, Jen represents the traumatized, abused little boy in me, who got nothing but rage and stuff from my father. And since I've had no help to deal with that internal rage dynamic then, which I took on some of the rage of my father, then that is directed at my own inner little boy who's incoherent and not good enough. And so that same bullying dynamic of the rager in me to try and get that little boy to be perfect enough to be loved is then directed at my wife, including the incredulity and rage that she expects to be loved and to be fine while doing very little to be perfect. So that's also the unfairness of it. I had to do all these things and keep every promise and avoid this trap and do this just so I could be good enough to be loved. And you lay around doing nothing and don't do this and don't do that and break your promise and do this, make assaults and sulk and be a little child, and you still expect to be loved? I'd like to be loved for being imperfect and unhappy and this and that and the other, but no one's loving me. What makes you think you're better than me? So there's a sense And there's so these things. So the rage of Michael, the loneliness of Sherilyn, my mother, the abandonment of the family, the incapacity to find any sense of real family. Having to do this on my own, realizing that therapists are as much a threat as a benefit after grasping the extent of the abuse. It's just so heavy carrying these feelings around all day. That's just so sore. It's heavy and sore, and I'm alone. My wife is sleeping. I'd like to talk about this. Well, tough shit. Go talk to a camera. And I know who I was and would be without these dynamics. And it's, of course, a much happier, gentler, healthier person that I like and that other people like more. But I also understand every one of the dynamics that leads or makes this highly likely, not only for me, but for all kinds of traumatized people, particularly men, who expressed, Jen, my wife, pulled out her own hair as an 8-year-old. So it was self-rage. It's the same rage, she just directs it at the self. I'm aware enough to understand that almost everything that I'm enraged about has almost nothing to do with me, in the sense I don't believe in having kids if you're an incompetent parent, but I wasn't consulted. I don't believe in leaving emotional literacy and trauma literacy out of high school curriculums, but again, no one wants to actually learn anything intelligent from me. I don't think therapists should be able to be coaches or therapists without becoming traumatically literate. But the therapists disagree. I don't think it's a good strategy on the part of my wife to first break promise and then make ridiculous lies to someone who's never lied to anyone in their life. I think that's not a good plan, but again, she doesn't ask me, Dane, what would be a good plan when we're having a fight. She does the worst possible plan, whether I like it or not, without consulting, and will not do it differently in the future. And so my choice is simply to extricate myself from the relationship, or accept that I'm going to fall into a rage from time to time, feel guilty about it, feel angry that I'm left feeling guilty about it, suggest maybe you'd be happier with somebody else. No. I'm not interested in any other man. Wonder if this is, healthy or unhealthy. It's just one more, thing. And how do I get to talk through all of this? This is probably one of my best conversations about this pressure cooker that goes on constantly, 24/7 to one degree or another. And so it is 1, 2, somewhere between 1 and 2% of my identity, the explosive, impatient defense against grief and helplessness and loneliness, this rage.